Hello friend, welcome back to my kitchen. If you're new, my name is Becky and I always have open drawers. Today, or not today, well today I'm gonna be sharing with you 5 slow cooker dinners and 1 slow cooker dessert. Did you know you could make a dessert in the slow cooker? I've done it one time and this is the first time I've done a crisp and it turned out fantastic. Last week, I made all these recipes last week. I had such a busy week, every day of the week. And they were those type of busy days where you didn't know when you wanted dinner to be done. So I thought slow cooker for the win, because I could set it, forget it, and when I was ready for dinner, my dinner would be ready for me. So I made them one after the other. I will link them. Some of them I actually prepped on one day, but then I actually cooked them on another day. But I'm gonna put them in order for you so you can see how to make these incredible slow cooker dinners. I will timestamp them and put the printable written recipe down in the description box if you want to jump to a specific recipe. The last recipe is chicken tetrazzini in the slow cooker. I will type that up the way I did it, and I will also link for you the recipe that I got inspired by, because I did it a little bit different and it turned out fantastic. One of Josh's favorite meals is baked chicken tetrazzini, and sometimes I don't have that in me to do that, and it worked out so well to do it in the slow cooker. Without further ado, enjoy these recipes.
This first recipe is going to be slow cooker pork carnitas. We're going to make a homemade sauce for it to cook in all day. And then I had some inspiration in the afternoon to make some homemade corn tortillas. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do that and how we're going to take this really yummy pulled pork and we're going to put it in our corn tortillas and kind of bake it in the oven to get a really crispy pork taco. So I have seen these type of recipes go around online for a long time. I've never done it and it is fantastic. So the first thing we're gonna do is put some pork shoulder or whatever kind of pork you have, ideally one that is a tougher cut like a pork butt or pork shoulder, in the slow cooker. And then we're gonna make a yummy sauce to go on it. Now these are the Cara oranges. I've showed you these when we've gone shopping together, but I wanted to show you the inside of them. They are incredibly delicious. They are almost like a blood orange in color. They're not quite as red as a blood orange, but they're sweet and they are our new favorite orange. So I'm going to juice some of those because I had those on hand. If you only have some bottled orange juice, go ahead and use that. I'm also going to use some fresh limes that I have on hand, and I am going to make one substitution to the recipe I'm going to link down below. It called for chipotles in adobo. I did not have any of those. I wanted to make this because I found the pork in my freezer and I wanted to use it up. And I thought I had chipotles in adobo when I decided to make this. And then when I was searching around this morning, I couldn't find it. And so I was looking at the back of a jar of chipotles in adobo online and looking at the ingredients. And I thought, you know what? I have all the ingredients. I think I could kind of make a substitution. So I figured I would show you what that substitution is. And this is my new favorite citrus juicer. It is meant for lemons and limes, but I was able to get the orange in it. So here is the substitution for the chipotles in adobo. I'm going to put in some tomato paste, apple cider vinegar, and then chipotle powder. When I was looking at the ingredients, that's mostly what it is, and then other spices, but we're going to get those other spices with what the recipe calls for. We're going to put in a ton of the spices we like. So we've got cumin, coriander, garlic powder, onion powder, salt, pepper, a lot of paprika. This is smoked paprika, but use smoked or unsmoked, whatever you have on hand, and a good amount of oregano. I'm just going to mix that together, and that is going to be our sauce. The recipe I'm linking for you says to blend your sauce in the blender. That's because if you use chipotles in adobo, they're obviously whole jalapenos and they need to be blended, but I'm making my own homemade substitution, so I don't need to worry about that. I also added a couple tablespoons of honey to kind of counteract that spiciness of the chipotles. I do taste this, or chipotle powder. I use chipotle powder. The nice thing actually about this substitution, the tomato paste and chipotle powder and vinegar instead of using the chipotles in adobo, is you can control the spicy level of it if your family doesn't love spice. Not everyone in my family does, so I was able to put a little less chipotle powder and a little more smoked paprika to get that smoky flavor and the vinegar flavor without it being too spicy. So now we have our homemade sauce mixed up. I'm going to chop an onion, and I did leave kind of the root end because we're not going to eat this onion. This onion is purely for delicious flavor. I'm going to nestle that onion in the slow cooker. I'm going to get a lot of garlic in here. This pork was already kind of chopped into smaller pieces, and so I didn't have to do that. But if you just had a whole pork butt or pork shoulder, you could throw that in here. You don't need to chop it up. Just know it'll take a little longer to cook. I'm going to pour our yummy sauce over it, get the lid on it, and get this slow cooking. So like I said, I had a very busy computer workday on this day, and I wanted a recipe where I could just have it ready to go for me when I was ready for it. That is what I have found the beauty of slow cookers is they can wait for you, and they will just be sitting there waiting for you when you're ready to come back to them. So I'm going to do a little bit of cleaning, putting all my spices away. You could do the same thing probably if you had a favorite taco seasoning. I don't have any taco seasoning in my house right now. If you didn't want to get all these spices out, just juice some oranges or use orange juice, juice a couple limes or use bottled lime juice and your favorite taco seasoning, and that would be delicious as well. Now that our protein is going and I've kind of tidied up the kitchen, we're going to get going on a sauce. I am a sauce loving person, and a good sauce can just bring an average dinner, I think, over the top. So I have one bunch of cilantro going in the blender. We're going to make a jalapeno sour cream kind of dressing or dipping sauce. I'm going to slice this jalapeno in half and get the seeds out. You could leave the seeds in if you wanted. And then I'm going to use some of my cowboy candy, which is a pickled sweet jalapeno. And we're going to go ahead and put a couple big spoonfuls of that in there. And then we are going to juice 1 lemon and put in about 1.5 cups of sour cream. I salt and peppered it. I added a little bit of garlic powder, cumin, and coriander. I thought, oh, I probably shouldn't have put those spices away because I had to pull them back out to put them in the sauce, but that's how cooking goes in my house, is sometimes I do double the work. Once I've got all my seasonings in there, I'm going to go ahead and blend it up. And if you wanted a little bit more chunky, you could go ahead and do this in a food processor. I wanted this to be a really smooth dipping sauce, so I threw mine in the blender. And then I do give it a taste and I adjust the seasoning. It was pretty spicy. The cowboy candy I made was pretty hot. I would have left it just like that if it was my own sauce and no one else in my family was going to eat it. But I'm the only one that loves really, really hot things. So I did add a little bit of honey. I blended that up and that balanced out some of that heat. It was kind of borderline for Josh. He did really enjoy it and he ate a lot of it, but it was a little spicy. So I'm glad I added that little bit of honey. So here it's mid-afternoon now. Dinner has been cooking for quite some time and I am ready to get going on, I guess it's 1:04. I'm getting ready to go on making some homemade corn tortillas. I had been sitting at my computer for a very long time and I was ready to do something other than staring at my computer. So I got inspired to make tortillas. You do not have to make your own homemade tortillas if you don't want to. Use corn or flour for how we're going to turn these into a crispy, crunchy taco once we shred our pork. But I wanted to kind of get out of my office. I wanted to get into the kitchen. I wanted to make some tortillas. So that's what we're doing. I have tried quite a few different corn massas and I keep coming back to this one. I just get it at my local grocery store. I can link it for you if you don't have it at your grocery store, but I really like the flavor of the King Arthur's organic masa. And I just follow their recipe on the back of the package. I did pull out my scale for this, so the only ingredients in this are masa, salt, and water. You're going to mix that together. And then I did need to end up adding a little bit more masa because the dough was feeling a little bit sticky to me. This is me still measuring out with my scale how much water and masa flour it said to use, but once you kind of start making tortillas, you will get a feel for, oh, on this day it happens to need a little bit more or it needs a little bit less. And I could tell that it was a little too sticky, so I did end up adding a little bit more masa flour. And then I have my tortilla press out because we are going to use the tortilla press to press out these corn tortillas. So at this point, I am just mixing it together and kind of getting a feel for the dough. Once I'm happy with it, we can start cooking. Now, before I even started making the dough, I started preheating my griddle pan because I want my griddle pan nice and hot before I start cooking these. I just eyeball how big to make these. I grab a thing of dough and I press it into a little disc, and then I put it between my parchment paper. I press down what is about 75% of the thickness, I think, and then I always rotate it, press down the last bit, and that way I feel like I get a more even tortilla from one end to the other. And then we will go ahead and just put this onto our preheated griddle pan. Now, I didn't brown these as much as I could have if I was going to serve these for tacos on this night. They were a little bit light on the toastiness, and I did that thinking I don't need to toast them all the way. I mean, they're fully cooked, but they're not like super brown because we're going to stuff them with cheese and shredded pork and then kind of, I want to say fry them because I put oil on them, but we do not fry them. We bake them in the oven, but we get that kind of crunchy fried texture with the oil that we're going to bake them on in the oven. And I'll show you how to do that when we get to that point, but it is still afternoon and I am still making the tortillas and the pork is still cooking away. My house smells incredible, by the way. So I'm just going to flip these. These do not take very long to cook. And we got quite a few of them. I ended up only using half of them for this dinner, and then the other half that I made on this day, I threw in the freezer, and now I have about 10 corn tortillas that are homemade that are in my freezer that are going to be just waiting for me next time I need some corn tortillas. The dough on some of them did want to stick a little bit to the parchment paper, so I do end up adding just a tiny bit of avocado oil, just like a drop, to my parchment paper, and I rub it around the parchment paper so that the masa dough comes off the parchment paper a little bit easier. See how easy that was? Much easier with just a little bit of oil on them. One of the biggest tricks when it comes to making homemade tortillas, whether that is flour or corn, I have found for myself to get a soft and tender tortilla that doesn't break on you, is to make sure when you take them off the griddle pan to put them directly into a clean dish towel and let the steam finish the cooking process. Or I don't know if it actually finishes the cooking process. They're fully cooked when I take them off the griddle pan, but something about having a stack of hot tortillas in a towel steaming together really lends to a nice, soft, and pliable tortilla that is way less likely to break on you. So here is our stack of tortillas. And you could see I probably could have browned them a little bit more if I was cooking these to have just plain tacos, but these are going to be turned into crunchy tacos, so they will get nice and crispy in the oven. So we have a whole big stack of tortillas. I think the recipe said it was supposed to make 16 tortillas. I'm pretty sure that mine might have been a little bit on the smaller side because I think I got more like 25 tortillas. And look how beautiful this pork looks. It is much later in the day, and I'm gonna take this pork out of the slow cooker, let it cool just a little bit so that I can shred it up. My family doesn't like any big pieces of fat, so what I always do is when I cook any sort of protein like this in a slow cooker, I take it out of the slow cooker, I let it cool just a little bit, and then I shred the pork with my hands so that I can remove any of the excess fat that we aren't wanting to eat. Now here I did pour this amazing broth into my fat separator, and I'm going to get the broth back into the slow cooker, and I'm going to just keep the fat off so that that can be discarded. Now, one thing I always like to do is taste for seasonings. Does it need any salt? Does it need any pepper? Does it need any acid? Are the flavors balanced? Is it too spicy? Do I need to add a little extra honey? And it tasted perfect. So we did not need to add anything. And now I'm going to shred up this pork. I really do think this is where the slow cooker shines, is with making tough cuts of meat, super tender and super delicious. Now on this night, we were ready to eat dinner, but one of our neighbors called and asked for Josh's help on a project. So I was planning to go ahead and turn this pork right into the pork tacos right now at this point, but Josh got called away. So I went ahead and didn't want to make dinner until Josh was ready to eat. So I end up taking this pork and putting it back on keep warm so that it would be warm and ready for me when we were ready to make our tacos. I didn't shred it quite enough with my hands, so I went in there with this spoon and a fork, and I'm going to shred it just a little bit more. At this point, Josh is back home, so we can finish this dinner. I have a cookie sheet with a piece of parchment paper on, purely for easy cleanup. And then I'm gonna get some olive oil, probably about a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of olive oil on my piece of parchment paper. And this is what is gonna help crisp up these corn tortillas that we made earlier. I'm going to lay 4 corn tortillas out. We're gonna end up making 6 on this night, and then the rest of it, I just put the corn tortillas in the freezer. And I want to get a little bit of oil on the entire one side of the tortilla so that when I fold it over, it's going to have a little bit of oil on it and it's going to get nice and crispy. The first thing I'm going to add to these tacos is a little bit of sharp cheddar cheese. That's what I had on hand, so that's what I'm using. Use whatever kind of cheese you want. And then we're going to top that with some of our pork. This pork had such delicious, like smoky, sweet flavor. It was so good. And you could do this technique with any kind of protein. This is the first time I've ever done this. I've seen this technique many times online, but I've never actually done it. And now that I've done it, I will absolutely be doing this technique of making basically kind of like a crunchy taco. And you could use flour tortillas, corn tortillas, any kind of protein. You could even do beans and cheese and skip the, oh my goodness, I'm just now thinking it's kind of like a quesadilla. I was thinking they were crispy tacos, but now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, did I just make quesadillas in the oven? I don't know. Whatever they're called, they are delicious. I was having a little bit of hard time getting the tortilla to stay folded over, but I just kind of pushed on it a little bit and then it would stay folded over. And here's where you can see I want a little bit of oil on both sides of the tortilla so that it gets crispy. And then I thought I should probably have a little bit of cheese on both sides of the protein so that once it melts, it kind of holds the taco, or now I guess maybe quesadilla together. That's so funny. I can't believe I just thought that maybe I actually just made quesadillas in the oven. I have my oven preheated to 425 degrees and we are going to get these quesadilla tacos in there. And then while that's cooking, I'm going to start some rice. I have just some white rice in my Instant Pot. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. I'm going to get that going, and we're going to make a copycat Chipotle cilantro rice. I just push the rice button, and my rice usually turns out pretty good when I use my Instant Pot. I don't really like cooking rice on the stove, so I used to have a rice cooker, and when I got my Instant Pot, I had both my rice cooker and my Instant Pot for a long time, and then I realized I think an Instant Pot can do the job for both. And the key to good cilantro rice is to add a little bit of olive oil and lemon juice. Chipotle actually uses lemon juice, not lime juice. It's a little bit sweeter than lime juice, so that's what I add. And then I have some freeze-dried cilantro from last year's garden still, so I'm going to put that in here, mix that up, and dinner is almost done. On this night, it was kind of a pantry pull because I had not gone to the store yet, and so I was trying to use things I already had on hand. I already had the pork in my freezer that I wanted to get used up, and the rest of it were things that I had on hand. I actually didn't even have tortillas That's why I made the corn tortillas. But if I had tortillas, I maybe wouldn't have gone through the effort of making homemade corn tortillas, but they turned out delicious. And now I happen to have quite a few extra corn tortillas. So I do flip these tacos halfway through the cooking process. You can see they got super crunchy on the bottom half. And I don't remember how long I cooked these for, probably 10 or 15 minutes at 425 degrees. And I let them cook until they got golden brown and crunchy on both sides. And then the way that I'm going to serve these up is tacos with the cilantro lime rice and the cilantro jalapeno dip that we made earlier and some homemade hot sauce. This was delicious. I have never made anything well, I've made the rice before, but I've never made crunchy tacos. But now I'm thinking a crunchy taco is just another name for a quesadilla. But in any case, they turned out delicious. This next recipe is another recipe where I just pulled items from the pantry and was able to make this recipe. It is basically a slow cooker hamburger helper. I found a recipe that I'm going to link for you down below where it's kind of the inspiration for this recipe, but I do end up adapting the recipe a little bit. I have a stovetop version of a hamburger helper, and so I added a few more ingredients than the recipe that I got inspired by called for. I've never made a slow cooker hamburger helper, so I needed a recipe that had, the ratio of liquids to pasta, but I also wanted to add a few ingredients because I have a very hard time following a recipe, as you all know. So I'll let you know how I end up adapting this recipe, so I think that it will be a favorite for my family. So what I have here is a yellow pepper. The recipe called for a red, but I had a yellow one that needed to be used up, so I used that. And then I have an onion here. If you wanted to skip the chopping part and make this recipe even easier, go get a bag of frozen chopped onions and peppers. If I had that in my freezer and I didn't have a fresh, I would have used that, but I needed to use these up, so we're going to use these up. I also have 1 pound of ground beef cooking on the stove. So that's kind of the prep that has to be done, and it's the hardest part of this recipe, but still very, very easy. So here I'm going to get my onions and my peppers in the slow cooker. If you wanted this to come together even quicker, you could cook the onions and peppers on the stove, but the whole point of this is that it's a set it and forget it type thing, and that's what I'm doing. So to my onions and peppers, I'm going to add some milk and marinara sauce. This is one of those recipes that once you get all of the sauce mixed up, you can literally just set it and walk away until you need to come back about 15 minutes before you serve, because we'll cook the noodles in here just a few minutes before we're going to serve it. Now what I'm going to add is some garlic and Worcestershire sauce. The Worcestershire was not in the original recipe, but in my stovetop hamburger helper recipe, I add Worcestershire sauce. So I'm going to go ahead and add about 2 tablespoons of that, along with a good amount of salt and pepper. And you saw the garlic pucks that I put in there. Now I'm going to add some onion powder and garlic powder. Even though I added those fresh, I'm going to add a little bit of powdered. And now I am going to flip my ground beef. So I've just been letting this ground beef brown up really, really well over here on the stove while I was making up the sauce. Whenever I make ground beef, I try to make sure I get a really nice dark caramel color to the beef, so that adds lots and lots of flavor. And then this is going to go in the slow cooker. And at this point, you can cook it on low all day long or cook it on high for about half the day. It's one of those things that you can set and forget, and you don't really have to do much about it. You don't have to really worry about it overcooking or something like that. So I'm going to bring my slow cooker over to this other side of the counter so it can just sit and cook for me. This I had on, I think, high for a few hours, and then at some point throughout the day I turned it on low. And about 15 minutes before we serve this, what we're going to do is we are going to add our noodles. This was a really busy garden day for me. So the next 2 days that we are going to be doing these slow cooker days our slow cooker dinners are huge outside project days. And that's why I wanted dinners that would be super, super easy, where they would be waiting for me when I was ready. When I'm doing big garden projects, I never fully know when dinner is going to be. And so it's nice when something can just sit and wait for me. So about 15 minutes before dinner was ready, I added our noodles. The recipe called for 3 cups of small macaroni, but I had a 1-pound box and it was like 3.5 cups. I went ahead and just added the whole box. And then because I added a little bit extra noodles, I just topped that with a little bit of heavy cream since I had it on hand. And then the recipe called for a half a cup of sharp cheddar cheese. I ended up putting in a whole cup. So that's where I'm kind of making it more like my stovetop Hamburger Helper, but I'm using the technique of this recipe because the technique was one I had never done before, but I kind of wanted to go more with the flavor profiles that my family is used to. And this turned out amazing. Not only was it delicious for dinner on this night, but Josh had it for lunch a couple times, and it was so creamy, rich, and velvety and delicious. Highly, highly, highly recommend this recipe. How I served this up was I just dished some of it up in a bowl, and then I topped mine with a little bit of Tabasco sauce, and dinner was done. So easy, so comforting, and so delicious. This next slow cooker recipe is a maple chipotle barbecue beef sandwich, and this was a huge hit. We're going to actually make a homemade barbecue sauce, and it's going to come together in the blender really, really quickly. My parents, on the day that I end up putting this in the slow cooker, I'm actually prepping this the day before. I'm going to let the sauce sit on the beef and just hang out in the refrigerator. I knew that the following day I was going to be super busy and did not want to worry about getting this going. I had a few minutes on this day, so we are going to get the beef in the slow cooker. I have a big chuck roast in there, and then I had some steaks thawed for some other night's dinner that we never got around to using. So I wanted to go ahead and just throw those in there and let those cook with the chuck roast, and we would just have pulled beef sandwiches. Now to make the barbecue sauce, it's going to come together really, really quickly. I have an onion here that I'm going to do a rough dice on, and we're actually going to make this barbecue sauce in the blender. So I probably didn't need to chop it this much, but I wanted to give the blender a little bit of a head start. Now I'm going to add that to the blender along with some marinara sauce. And to make this more like a barbecue sauce, we're going to add quite a bit of vinegar, and I wanted to get out the rest of the marinara sauce from this jar, so I went ahead and put the apple cider vinegar in the jar and topped that into our sauce. Now to make this maple flavored, we're going to add some maple syrup. This was actually my dad's request. So we were hanging out with my parents over the weekend, and we knew that they were going to be coming over on this day to do some garden projects and to do some Mother's Day shopping. I told my dad the recipes that I was thinking of making, and he said he would like this one the most. So that is what I'm making. Now to the blender, I just added garlic powder, onion powder, chipotle powder. I didn't add too much because I didn't want it to be too spicy. Some Worcestershire sauce, salt, and pepper. And then we will blend this barbecue sauce up with some fresh garlic from the freezer. And that is our barbecue sauce. I do taste it to make sure the seasonings are on point. Don't ever be afraid to taste your food. It's really nice when you make a sauce like this before you add it to the meat, that you can give it a taste and adjust the seasonings as needed. I almost never actually measure out anything when I'm cooking. Now when I'm baking, I do measure things out, and I'm actually even starting to weigh my ingredients out. Not always, but sometimes. But when it comes to cooking, I cook more with my heart, and I don't have it in me to pull out all the measuring spoons and things like that. I want to just use a spoon and eyeball it. So what that means for me is that I really have to taste and adjust. And you know, my family's taste preferences might be different than the recipe writer's taste preference. So, you know, we might like things a little bit sweeter or a little less salty or a little more garlic, almost always a little more garlic. So I almost always will taste and adjust, taste and adjust. The next morning, I went ahead and I pulled out some hamburger buns and I got the beef in the slow cooker. I turned it on high so that I could just let this cook, and I didn't have to think about the buns and I didn't have to think about meals. All I had to think about was enjoying time shopping with my mom and then getting in the garden and working with my dad. I figured since I was having my parents over for dinner, we needed to have a dessert as well. I have made a peach cobbler in the slow cooker once, and I thought this time it would be interesting to try a crisp. Apple crisp was a staple dessert in my household growing up. My mom probably made it every 3 weeks or so. I feel like if I said she made it once a month, that wouldn't be enough. And if she made it every other week, that would have been too much. So probably about every 3 weeks or so, we had an apple crisp. And I thought, let's try to make that in the slow cooker. I thought this might be a little bit of a gamble, whether it was going to turn out or not, because I obviously know that making an apple crisp in the oven turns out delicious. And I figured the texture would probably be a little bit different in a slow cooker. But with the ingredients that we add, I figured it couldn't be terrible, even if it wasn't our favorite. So I thought it would be fun just to give it a try. So I looked at a couple recipes and they all just looked basically the exact same as a crisp that you would make in the oven. You're just going to make it in the slow cooker instead. So I did follow a recipe that I found online. But if you had a favorite crisp recipe, you could just make up your crisp, whether that's berry or apple, and throw it in the slow cooker. After we try this, I will come back and let you know our verdict, whether I thought it was worth making a crisp in the slow cooker as opposed to the oven. So how I am going to make it though, is I just have, a few different varieties of apples. I have a mixture of some, I think they were Honeycrisp and Granny Smith apples. And I'm going to chop them, remove the seeds, and just give them a rough kind of chop into slices. I just had the thought, I've never made an apple crisp dicing the apples before. I wonder if that would be good. It would definitely be a different texture. My mom always sliced the apples. I wonder if diced would be good. It's always interesting how you prepare, whether it's a slice or a dice or something like that, even though it's the same technically flavor, the texture of it can really change the way something tastes in my mind. I might be alone in that. I don't know. And I do have one of those core peeler slicers, but I figured I'm just going to go ahead and dice this up with my knife and use my potato peeler. I always call it I guess I usually call it a vegetable peeler, not a potato peeler, but that worked just as easy for these. I think I have like 6 or 7 apples here. And then once I got those in the slow cooker, I'm going to season it with just a little bit of sugar. The recipe that I'm following did not call for much sugar at all. And then a good amount of cinnamon. And my favorite part, whole nutmeg. So I'm going to grate that in there. And that was it. It didn't call for any flour. It didn't call for any starch of any kind. It just called for the spices, a little bit of sugar, and to mix that together. I always like to wipe the rim down because I feel like if there's sugar stuck around a slow cooker, it would burn. And now we're going to make our crisp part, which is always my favorite part. It has butter, flour, brown sugar, and oats. I did melt the butter just a little bit, not melt it totally, but I softened it in the microwave. So some of it was melted, some of it was still pretty cold. And so I just take a fork and I kind of cut that into the dry mixture. I did add a little bit of salt. I don't know if I showed that part, but I did add a little bit of salt. Almost any time I make sweet desserts, if a recipe does not call for a pinch of salt, I usually will add a pinch of salt just to help balance the sweetness. Now the crisp topping is going to go on the top, the lid is going to go on, and then we're going to get this started. So I made this up the day my parents came over. The roast I made the day before. And then I started it in the early morning. This was a little bit later morning when I started it. Here's what it is looking like right before we're about to have dinner. So I'm going to put that on warm, and then we're going to pull this dinner together. My mom and I had been working in the garden. My dad is over, and my mom is going to help me pull this dinner together. I pulled the beef out of the slow cooker, just like I pulled the pork out. I let it cool a little bit, and now I'm going to shred it and pull off the bone and any of the excess fat that was on the beef. My mom is going to make up a vinaigrette coleslaw. If it was just my family, not my parents over, I would have made a mayo-based coleslaw, but my parents don't like mayo, so I went ahead and used this copycat Olive Garden dressing that I had already in my fridge, and it was really good. I probably wouldn't have thought to put a vinaigrette type based salad dressing with a barbecue, I keep wanting to say barbecue pulled pork sandwich, but a barbecue beef sandwich, and it was really, really good. So that's one thing that's always kind of fun about trying new things, is you never know what you're going to really like. After I shredded the beef, I put that in with the barbecue sauce, and you see me a lot of times when I make shredded beef or shredded pork, I pour the broth or the sauce into a fat separator and then pour just the broth back. But I didn't have to do that with this one, which was really nice. And while I was shredding the beef, my mom was slicing up the buns. Last time we did a big baking freezer meal prep day, we had made a ton of homemade hamburger buns using fresh milled flour. And so that's why I was able to pull those out of the freezer and have those thaw all day, and they haven't been warmed up. And I want to melt the cheese. So after my mom sliced them, I went ahead and topped them with some beef. I have the oven preheated to 350 degrees, and I'm going to put those in there for about 8 minutes or so that the buns can get nice and warm. And then I had pre-sliced provolone and cheddar, and I asked, the people that were going to be eating this dinner, what would you like, provolone or cheddar? And they were the thin sliced pieces of cheese. So with whatever people requested, if it was provolone, I went ahead and put a piece of provolone over top of the shredded beef so it would hold the beef together, and then I put a piece of cheese on the bun. Now, I was a little bit nervous to have my parents try the 100% fresh milled hamburger buns. I love them, Josh loves them, but they have a little bit of a different flavor and texture, and they loved them. My dad took all the leftovers home. I had one hamburger bun left. I had a little bit of meat left, and he loved it. I had enough leftovers in my fridge. He took that home so he could have that for lunch the next day. So that was a really big, yay kind of feeling for me. I really was happy about that. This is my dad serving up his plate. I went ahead and I put my coleslaw on top of my bun because I like that crunch. And this is how we served it up. Some people put the coleslaw on the side. I put mine on the top. We ate it outside. It was the first dinner we had outside as a family, and it was wonderful. And after dinner, we served up the crisp and topped it with a little bit of vanilla ice cream. This was so good. I'm not a huge apple dessert person. It's Josh and my dad's favorite. I like berry fruit things better than apple, but I really liked this. I liked that the crisp topping was not super, super crispy, that it was kind of, I don't want to say oatmeal because it definitely had more texture and crunch to it than that, but I liked that the topping kind of melted into the apples, and I liked how soft the apples got. This was so good. I didn't think I was going to like this, but I really liked it. You're going to hear Josh's thoughts on the crisp at the end, because we're going to come back together and talk through all the recipes and what his thoughts were on all the recipes when we're done. So here is me packing up all of the leftovers for my dad and mom to take home so that they can enjoy a lunch that they do not have to prepare. Even though I only had one bun, they took that with them. So that's for my mom. Now we're going to make one of Josh's favorite dinners in the slow cooker. I normally make this as a baked pasta, but we're doing slow cooker dinners. So we're going to make chicken tetrazzini in the slow cooker. And I am going to adapt my normal chicken tetrazzini for the slow cooker. I had never thought of making this recipe in a slow cooker before until I came across a recipe for it when I was researching recipes. And it sounded really good, and I'm going to link that recipe for you down below, but it didn't have all the ingredients that I like in a chicken tetrazzini, so I'm going to try to adapt my recipe that I normally make as a stovetop and oven recipe in the slow cooker. So in here I have some chicken breast seasoned with salt and pepper, I have mushrooms that are sliced, onions that are diced, and garlic. Now we're going to make the liquid portion of this recipe. Again, slow cooker recipes shine in the fact that they are set it and forget it, which is nice because I actually prepped this recipe the same day I prepped the Hamburger Helper, and I just put the crock pot insert in my refrigerator until the morning I cooked it, and then I just put the liner in the crock pot and pushed on. And what I'm doing is I'm adding my liquid ingredients to a bowl because we have to make the cream sauce portion of this chicken tetrazzini. In the bowl, I have heavy cream, chicken broth, and some white wine. I'm now going to add my flour, and I'm going to make basically like an uncooked roux. Obviously, there's no butter in that, so that is not the proper term for it, but I'm going to use that flour to thicken this chicken tetrazzini as it cooks, as opposed to using a can of cream something. I do this all the time and it always has worked, so we're going to do it for this recipe. I now am going to add some basil, salt and pepper, some fresh grated nutmeg. I'm going to get that covered with all the goodness. I'm going to wipe the edges down, put the lid on it. I actually popped it into my refrigerator until the morning I was ready to cook this. When I was ready to cook it, I put it in my crock pot liner and I put it on high. And then this is what it looked like when we were about 30-40 minutes to when we're going to eat. I end up taking the chicken out and I stir this really, really well to get a nice smooth sauce. And we still need to add a couple more ingredients to this to finish it out. So here I took the chicken out so I can dice it. I whisked the sauce together so it was nice and smooth. I scraped the edges of the slow cooker, and then I add a cup of Parmesan cheese. I let that cook. I added some and then I was like, that's not enough. So I added more. And then I'm going to let that cook for, I don't know, about 15-20 minutes or so while we put on a pot of water to boil and we cook some egg noodles. I am trying these egg noodles for the first time from Azure. These are a really simple ingredient egg noodle and they are very good. They kind of taste like a homemade egg noodle, but they are with durum wheat, which is kind of interesting, and the flavor was really, really good. So on this night, it was yet again another busy garden day, and so it was nice just to have the slow cooker going for me. And then when I was ready to finish dinner, all I had to do was take the chicken out of the slow cooker, dice it up, add the cheese, mix it together, add the chicken back into the slow cooker, and boil up some noodles. And we are going to make a Caesar salad as well. I think like 4 or 5 days before, I had made up a homemade Caesar dressing that was in my fridge, and I wanted to get it used up because I had this head of romaine that needed to be used up as well. And I thought a Caesar salad would taste really good with this pasta dish on this night. So I go ahead and I dice up some romaine. And then if you've never had toasted breadcrumbs on your Caesar salad, it is incredibly delicious. There's a pizza restaurant that sadly no longer exists, and they used to serve this Caesar salad with toasted breadcrumbs. And the first time I had it, I was mind blown how delicious it is. All you have to do is melt some butter on the stove, add your breadcrumbs, season it with some salt and pepper, let it cool, and then you will have the most delicious crunchy topping for your Caesar salad. Now you do want your breadcrumbs to cool before you put them in your Caesar salad because warm croutons or warm breadcrumbs on Caesar salad is not good. So I do transfer the breadcrumbs to a plate just so that they can cool off a little bit faster. Now, the reason I did make those breadcrumbs is because I didn't have croutons. A lot of times I'll make homemade croutons, but we didn't have any bread. So I always have breadcrumbs on hand. So since I learned that trick, it's become a delicious trick to have a homemade crunchy addition to salads with being able to use up a waste product basically, because I only ever make breadcrumbs out of leftover bread that we didn't end up eating at some point. So now I've got my pasta cooked up. I cooked it up in very, very well seasoned boiling water so that the noodles are delicious. And let me tell you, friend, this was so good. I personally think I like chicken tetrazzini that is baked in the oven more than the slow cooker, but Josh likes both of them the same. He will talk to you about his thoughts on chicken tetrazzini. This is one of his favorite dinners, is the baked chicken tetrazzini that I make. But I was really happy that he liked this recipe a lot because this was easier. It felt easier because you didn't have to saute the onions or the mushrooms or, start it on the stove and then put it in a baking dish and bake it. You can just make it basically all except for the noodles in the slow cooker. So that was nice. And then here we're just going to make up our salad. On this evening, we were prepping to get our honeybees. We spent, maybe 2 or 3 hours working on cleaning out the hives so that we could get our honeybees on Saturday. I made this dinner on Thursday night, and we had to get the beehives prepped and ready for us for Sunday morning. To top the salad, I am just going to shave some fresh Parmesan cheese, and here is what dinner looks like. A big old bowl of delicious Caesar salad with toasted breadcrumbs and chicken tetrazzini in the slow cooker. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. I'm excited Josh liked this because I will make this again.
Josh is here, and now that you've seen all the recipes, we thought we would just go through and let you know kind of the order of favorites and which ones are winner, winner, chicken dinner, and maybe which ones I wouldn't make again.
Well, first off, I'd say you can make all of them again because they were all very, very good. I'm trying to think of what would be the order of them.
Do you remember all of them? Do you want me to list them off
I can remember all of them.
Okay.
But I think I'm going to put them in order, but they were all very, very good.
Okay.
So any of them you can make again. I think the pulled pork on the tortillas that were kind of baked, those were really, really tasty. I like the baked corn tortillas. That would probably be first.
Would you like it better if I did it on flour tortillas? Because normally we're a flour tortilla
would maybe
type
make
of family.
make them a little bit more chewy instead of crispy.
Yeah, that's true.
But it was really, really good. Oh man, it's tough. Okay, I'm gonna say probably the chicken tetrazzini and the hamburger helper were probably tied for second.
Okay.
Those were really great, and they made excellent leftovers. I've been eating those all week, so those were awesome for reheating. And then the what was it? The
beef
sandwiches, the beef sandwiches. Those were also very good. What was it? Maple something?
They were like a maple chipotle barbecue sandwich with the bun and the cheese and
those
the coleslaw.
Were good as well. I mean, it doesn't feel fair putting those fourth. And obviously there was also the cobbler that you made in the slow cooker as well. So
Yeah.
that was
Now,
good.
question for you, because Josh really likes apple. I was going to do a berry one, but he loves apple. Do you prefer it in the slow cooker because it was kind of a little bit softer, or do you prefer it crunchy in the oven?
I think I probably prefer it crunchy in the oven.
Okay.
But it was good.
Yeah, it almost was kind of like a sauce, like a soft apple.
It was like a cobbler the second day. Kind of like
Yes.
after everything had kind of incorporated.
Exactly.
It was very, very good. But I do like a good crisp to it.
I think I would rank those exactly the same. The pork tacos, because the dipping sauce that we made was fantastic. The hamburger helper, now that I'm thinking back, I'm pretty sure I kind of made up my own recipe, or I adapted a recipe that I found. So I will link what I did, and I will link
the
original one that I got inspired by, but I'm pretty sure I added a few ingredients to that one. I added more cheese, and I added Worcestershire sauce, and the recipe will be down below for you. And then, for me, pork tacos, chicken tetrazzini, and hamburger helper kind of tied, just like Josh said, only because one was beef and one was chicken. It's kind of hard to rank those one over the other. And then my least favorite was the beef sandwiches, but they were delicious.
They were so good.
And I'm not a huge apple dessert fan. I enjoyed it in the slow cooker. I actually think I like the texture better in the slow cooker than the crunchy of the oven. But next time I make that, I want to make it with berries because hopefully the berries will be soon in season, but I could do it in the oven if you prefer it in the oven. I am getting ready for a dinner party. My guests should be here literally any minute. So I'm gonna let you go. I wanna thank you for taking time out of your day to spend time with me. The printable recipes will be linked, the ones that I got inspired by and what I made, down in the description box. If you wanna watch more videos, let me pop those here. You can go enjoy between now and the next upload. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.